Hello there, and today we are going to be talking about hibernation. In this case, hibernation of my 1987/88 Jaguar XJ40 3.6. Now, I tend not to use the car over winter. Basically, there's too much salt on the roads, it's very wet, and it's an early XJ40. And early XJ40s are largely extinct, and they also like to rust a lot more than later XJ40s for various reasons. This one is a rare survivor, and it just needs a little bit of extra mollycoddling just to sort of keep it in this sort of condition. What I tend to do before putting it away for winter, from an administrative perspective, I sawn the car using the DVLA website so that I don't have to pay tax over the winter. I keep the car insured, and it's always a good idea to potentially notify your insurer to advise them that the car is going to be laid up, as they may be able to potentially reduce the cost of your cover because you're not going to be driving it, so they just provide you with laid up cover. Or it sort of also allows them to understand that the car's not being used on the road, and if there is anything sort of bad sort of happening, say the garage collapses onto the car or anything, then they know that the car has been in storage. Now, what I'm actually doing is I don't like to wash the car using a hose, is I'm using some waterless wash and wax, and I'm just basically liberally covering the car with that. And in a moment I'll actually be buffing that out and going over it once with the blue cloth, which I've got there in my hands, and then once to buff it off with the yellow cloth, which I also have here. As an extra stage, what I also did, but I didn't film, was I have actually in the past applied a separate layer of wax to the car as well, which is also a very good idea. I've already put a layer of wax on it this summer, in fact several layers of wax to be honest, so for this one it was just sort of like a quick wash down with the wash and wax. And it does actually get quite a bit of dirt off the car. Initially I didn't get much dirt off there, as you saw on the cloth, but as I was going through, a lot more dirt actually came off a little later on. Now there's two ways of hibernating the car. So as regards filling it with fuel, I personally brim the tank. So what I've done with this is I've taken it out, I've gone to the local garage and I've brimmed it with super unleaded, so the tank is actually full. What I also like to do is I like to add in the correct amount of fuel stabiliser, because unleaded fuel tends to go off very, very quickly. It's not like good old leaded fuel, which you could leave in a tank for years and it would never lose its potency. Regular unleaded these days seems to have a very short shelf life, or very short storage life, so it sort of tends to last about a year, year and a half before it goes bad. And I have suffered some of the ill effects on that with this particular car, with it not running quite right. Although in fairness, I siphoned off a load of the stale fuel last year and gave it to my next door neighbour, who has been running it with no problems whatsoever in his MG B Roadster. He's got it set up so it will run on super unleaded from an ignition timing response perspective, sorry, and he's had no problems with it whatsoever. So I was more than happy to, instead of taking the fuel to the local tip, to give him about sort of 40 litres of the stuff which I'd siphoned out of the tank. The other reason I like to brim the tank is I have in the past with this particular car not brimmed the tank, and it's been left for a number of years in a dry garage, but moisture has gotten into the fuel tank obviously, and it has rotted the tank out from the inside out, which isn't fantastic, and it meant that when it was recommissioned, the fuel tank had to be replaced. So what I tend to do now is I keep the tank brimmed whenever the car is in storage, so that obviously no moisture will get in there. So all that's in the tank now is the petrol itself. As regards tyres, sort of two schools of thought with this. Ideally, you get the car up in the air, supported properly, and you have all of the tyres off of the ground. If for whatever reason, say sort of limited storage space in my case, as the garage is enough to fit the car in, but it is quite a tight squeeze, I tend to overinflate the tyres to around 45 psi. So what that does is it prevents the tyres from getting any sort of flat spots on them when it's been in storage, and also just sort of keeps, well, really just sort of stops the flat spots, to be honest. What you do before driving the car is reduce the pressures to the standard manufacturer recommended. Oh, that's a lovely shot of my arse there. I just look at it. I'm just narrating this and I just saw that and thought, oh god, that's awful. I apologise, viewers, for that. I've lost a little bit of weight, so these jeans, oh god, there it is again. These jeans are not exactly fitting properly. That's really putting me off what I was saying. Thank God it's just a front view now of me coming back down the side of the car, polishing and putting the windscreen wiper down. What was I saying? Yes, tyres. Overinflate the tyres to around 40 psi on this particular example. Is usually enough to stop them flat spotting over the winter. If they do flat spot, you can overinflate them for the first drive to say sort of 40 psi, take it for a spin, and then reduce them back to the normal PSI afterwards. Removing the battery, 13mm spanner to get the battery out. Obviously remove the battery locating clamp and undo the battery terminals. Not sure what the correct order is, but I did positive first, followed by negative. I then took the battery into the house, and I've actually got two separate chargers. I've got a charger which is quite a large charger and charges at quite a high ampage, and that's the sort of charger I tend to use if the battery is absolutely completely flat, to the point where my sort of winter trickle charger will not actually charge it whatsoever. I have another charger which is the winter trickle charger, which I tend to put the battery on and I leave it on over winter. Now at the moment I'm just covering up the car with this breathable cover. The cover itself is a Storm Force cover, and it was bought because it's actually the correct size for the car itself. It's actually an all-weather cover, so you can actually use it if you stored the car outside. It's just if you do store it outside, you need to periodically remove it, say once a week when it's dry, and just let the car air out. What I tend to do as well is I leave my driver's window open so that air can circulate through the car. I also leave the bonnet slightly ajar as well, so that any sort of air that's coming up underneath the car can circulate around and doesn't sort of get trapped and cause condensation in the engine bay area. If you are storing the car outside, make sure that you store it on a hard standing ideally, and not on grass or anything like that. You do tend to find if you are storing it on grass, you may sort of start to find that the underside starts to rot a little bit because you have sort of like quite a lot of moisture there. So it is best to store it on a hard standing, or like me, in a well ventilated garage. In fact, this garage, the garage door had completely rusted out to the right of the picture there, so I removed the garage door. I need to get it dumped at some point anyway. But it just means that the garage is now sort of like a carport. So this is what I was on about earlier with the battery. We've got it all plugged in. We've got my trickle charger here, and it's a dual mode trickle charger actually, as it sort of does standard batteries, but it also does gel batteries. So it would do a standard charge, or if you put it onto the Icicle, that is a maintenance charge which it can use over the winter. So you just stick it on and then leave it. Now I hope this video has proven useful. If it has, please give it a like. If you have any sort of queries, don't forget to drop them in the comments, and also consider subscribing for more upcoming fascinating hobbies. Thank you very much for watching and take care.